We left Nueces River in April '81 with 3,000 longhorned cattle, and all they knowed was run. Well, we got them through the brush all right, clear up to San Antone. Got some grub and headed north as slick as any bone. Then we crossed the Colorado at Austin, a big town. Then headed north until we struck the store of great renown. And the old Red River was on the prod and swung from bank to bank. But we busted her and got across, a good horse for to thank. And the Washita was running full, but we got 'em all across and counted on the other side and never had a loss. Then we got to old Dodge City on the... Well, tonight I want to clear up some misconceptions about the cow. Well, tonight I want to cleared up some misconceptions about the cowboy. I've seen Hollywood westerns and read the novels, and I'm surprised at the amount of gunfighting that goes on. It was a rare event in my recollections. And all those cowboys wearing pistols on their hips. We hardly ever wore pistols. It got in the way of our work. Some men were afraid it would even draw the lightning carrying pistols. But we did do a lot of singing. In fact, I'd like to start out with a song I wrote for a man in our outfit, one of our outfits, named Larry Wolverton. It's called 40 Years a Cowpuncher, and it is a sing-along. There's a verse that I repeat if you feel like singing along. Come all you wild young cowpunchers, wherever you may be. Come one, come all, come right here now and listen unto me. 'Tis concerning Larry Wolverton, a bold rider was he, who came some 40 years ago from Memphis, Tennessee. Here's the part you can sing along with. He was 40 years a cowpuncher, and he never done things by halves. And the last words on his dying bed was, let's cut out the cows and calves. Well, he labored hard for 4 long years for the S&H outfit. And let me say, from the very first day, they never asked him to quit. And he made it his brag that he kept up the drag by the force of an old grass rope. And when they sent him out on relief, old Larry'd go out on a lope. He was 40 years a cowpuncher, and he never done things by halves. And his last words on his dying bed was, let's cut out the cows and calves. Well, God bless you, Larry Wolverton, you were so kind and good. You always made the horse wrangler go out and rustle up the wood. And to the spring for water he would go, and the coffee he ground so fine. And if anyone would dare complain, old Larry'd give him his time. He was 40 years a cowpuncher, and he never done things by halves. And the last words on his dying bed was, let's cut out the cows and calves. Well, there was one request that Larry he did crave. It's when he died, he wanted to ride old Muggins to his grave. Lay my spurs upon my breast, my rope and my old saddle tree. And while the boys are lowering me to rest, go turn my horses free. He was 40 years a cowpuncher, and he never done things by halves. And the last words on his dying bed was, "Let's cut out the cows and calves." Give my respects to Bud Bird, old Larry, he did cry. And raise me up and let me see old Muggins ere I die. Well, he was so weak he could scarcely speak. In a moment he was dead. "Oh, let's go in and carve up the beef," was the very last words he said. He was 40 years a cowpuncher, and he never done things by halves. And the last words on his dying bed was, "Let's cut out the cows and calves." Thank you. Well, I'll start out where I come from. A lot of people used to think I came from Texas. And I think that's because a lot of eastern Montana was settled by Texas cowboys who came here with the Texas cattle. But I was born in England in 1860. And in 1871, I came to this country with my family, and we settled in Nebraska. The first thing my father did was go down to Texas. He wanted to get into the cow business, so we went down to Texas, my brothers, my father, and I, and we bought some Texas Longhorns. Now, Nebraska at that time, the whole state west of Lincoln was open range country when we got there in '71. But about 1876, a flock of settlers took the country. And after that, there's very few places where you could hold cattle. But my father was lucky. There was a lot of open range country adjoining his place that didn't get settled till 79 or 80, and he ran cattle until then. But then, he went to farming with all the rest of them. And that's how I came to leave home for good. My father was all for farming at that time, and all my brothers turned out to be farmers, except one of them. He ended up the worst of the lot, a sheep man, and a Republican. But I stayed with the cattle and went north with them. You see, from the time I was 11 years old, I was out looking after my father's cattle, and I'd see these trail herds go by, and I got to spend some time with some of these cowpunchers, and I sure thought a lot of them. And I knew that when I got a little older, I'd take off with them. My father expected to make a farmer out of me, but it couldn't be done. Well, the summer I ran away from home, I was 18 years old, the summer of '78. And I got a job looking after a herd of cattle for some men in Lincoln. And they paid me 25 cents a head a month. So for 4 months, I made $125 a month. And those was big wages for a boy back then. Especially when the usual wage was ran as low as $10 a month. And I thought I was smart. And in the fall, those fellas sold their cattle to some feeders in the eastern part of the state, and I took them down there, driving them right through the streets of Lincoln. And then I went home. When I got home, my father says to me, "Teddy, you can take old Morgan and Kit and Charlie and plow the West Ridge tomorrow." Well, like hell if I'd plow the West Ridge tomorrow. When he got up the next morning, Teddy was gone. For the next 5 years, I went north with one trail outfit or another. I was young, 18, but I was no younger than a lot of them. Say the average age of cowboys back then, well, does anyone want to take a guess what the average age was?
20?
16. Close. I'd say 23 or 24. Except for some of the trail bosses, there's very few 30-year-old men on the trail. I remember this school teacher asked this old Texas cow dog once to tell her all about what it was like coming up the trail. She said, "Oh, Mr. So-and-so, Didn't the boys used to have a lot of fun riding their ponies? He said, ma'am, there wasn't any boys or ponies. They was all horses and men. And I remember that because it's true. We had to be to survive the life we led, the kind of riding we done all the time over rough country. Those deep coulees could open up all at once right in front of you before you had a chance to see where you were going. I remember one man in an outfit I was in during the daytime. He was reaching down to pick up a rope, running at full speed, and he and his horse went off a 25-foot cut bank, and the horse landed right on top of him, and that was into him. It was something awful to think about at nighttime, those cut banks, so we didn't think about them. And if a storm come up and the cattle started running, you'd hear that low rumbling sound along the ground. And the men on herd didn't need to come in and tell you. You'd know. And you'd jump for your horse, and you'd get out there in the lead, and you'd try and head them and get them into a mill before they scattered to hell and gone. It was riding at a dead run in the dark, with cut banks and prairie dog holes all around, not knowing if the next jump would land you in a shallow grave. I helped bury 3 men in shallow graves, very shallow graves. Remember, the first was when we had a stampede on the Blue River in '76. I was coming up with the trail herd belonging to John Lytle. He was delivering it to a man named Lord Jones. They took me along because I knew the country well, even though I was 15 years old. One night we camped right next to a great big prairie dog town, one of the biggest I'd ever seen. And that night it come up an awful storm. And it took all 4 of us to hold the cattle. We couldn't hold them. When morning come, there was one man missing. Well, we went back to look for him among the prairie dog holes, and we found him beside his horse. The horse's ribs was scraped bare of hide. And all that was left of horse and man was mashed into the ground as flat as a pancake. The only thing you could recognize was the handle on his 6-shooter. We tried to think that lightning done it. And that's what we wrote his folks in Henrietta, Texas. But I'm afraid it wasn't the lightning. I'm afraid his horse stepped in one of them prairie dog holes and they both went down before the stampede. Well, we got a shovel. We buried him on a hillside covered with round, smooth rocks. We dug away underneath him as best we could. Put a saddle blanket under him and piled rocks on top. It was the best we could do. The ground was hard and we didn't have no proper tools. But the awful part of it was that we had milled them cattle over him all night long, not knowing he was there. And that's the part we couldn't get out of our minds. And after that, orders was given to sing whenever you was running with the stampede, so that the others could tell where you were as long as they heard you singing. And if they didn't hear you singing, they'd know something was wrong. Well, after a while, this grew to be a custom on the range. Back in the 70s, it was still a new business, and we was learning all the time. Well, those are some of the natural hardships we had. It was no fun, the life of a cowboy. Especially when it came to some of the trail bosses we had to work for. Reminded me sometimes of a slave working for a master. These cattle drives coming up from Texas, they were professional contractors would put them together. Gathering up various ranchers, putting together a herd of up around 2,500 was what the average herd was. And I remember this one trail boss I worked for, it's an old man Foss from Vermont. He was a part owner and manager of the FUF outfit. And what this man didn't know about a trail herd could make a book so big you couldn't load it on a flat car with a block and tackle. He had fed a lot of cattle in Nebraska on corn, but he didn't know a cowpuncher when he saw one, and he hired everybody who come along. There was maybe 3 or 4 good hands in our outfit, myself included. The rest didn't know enough to pull on a rope. I remember there was an Englishman named Biggs, whose father was some sort of titled high-up. And then there was the nephew of the president from the company from Vermont, and a Frenchman from Louisiana who always went to sleep on night herd. I had to show him everything. I was making good wages, $75 a month, because they put me in charge of the wagon. The average wage was $30 a month. But in spite of the good wages, I didn't like that outfit. You couldn't like it, the way it was run. Half the orders Foss gave us was all wrong. And that's the hardest kind of a job to have to do something when you know it's wrong. A man like that had no business running a cow outfit. He couldn't get along with us cowpunchers, and he didn't know nothing. He was one of those pious New Englanders who'd say his prayers at night and give you $10 to steal a calf the next day. And I'll tell you more about what his religion was like. We were putting up a herd of cattle at Fort Kearney. We had bought a lot of cattle and horses in Missouri. We were bringing them up by train. The first train was mostly horses. And by order of Mr. Foss, all the cars was bedded with straw instead of sand, because it's cheaper, I suppose. But going uphill against the wind, sparks from the engine caught the front car on fire. And we didn't discover it because we was way back in the caboose. And when we did catch on that something was wrong, we couldn't get the engineer to stop. So I got on top of the train and started shooting up the bell on the engine with my 6-shooter, trying to get the engineer's attention. Finally, he caught on that something was wrong. And we got him off as fast as we could. The horses. God, I never want to see anything like that again. Some of them was still alive. Their eyes burned out, their hair all gone, and blood coming out of their nostrils with every breath. We was going to shoot them to put them out of their misery, but the old man wouldn't let us. Said if we did, he might not be able to collect his damages from the railroad company. So we had to leave him there. The man in charge of the second train shot him when he come along. Old man Foss. I guess he only lasted a year out west. He went back to Vermont. This man had no business out here. Even though he didn't know one end of a cow from the other, that didn't stop him from trying to revolutionize us cowboys. He said that was his intentions when we were down on the Platte. And when we got up to the Yellowstone, he went to work to carry them out. He issued orders forbidding us to bring the police gazette to the ranch. And when we went to town, we were not to take a drink. And he went along to make sure the order was obeyed. Well, we couldn't do nothing but give in to him more or less. But we was strangers up north. Winter was coming on. We was making good wages. We had to take a tumble. Well, here's where the story gets good. Along toward the end of that fall, the whole outfit was in Miles City. And one day, the old man was sitting in the hotel lobby, where he could keep his eye on the bar to make sure none of his boys was in there drinking. When in walked Calamity Jane. Now, I the first time I saw Calamity Jane was 5 years earlier in the Black Hills after we had delivered a herd of beef up there. I didn't get to meet her then, but I got a good look at her when she was at the height of her looks and her fame. I remember she had on a purple velvet dress and diamonds on her and everything. As I recall, she was running a great big gambling house in Deadwood. Well, the fall of '83 in Miles City, I finally met her and I bought her a few drinks, and it turns out we knew a lot of the same people. So when she walked into that hotel lobby where old man Foss was, I walked up to her and I told her all about him. And I said, "I'll give you $2.50 if you go over and sit in his lap and give him a kiss." She was all game. She walked over to him with everybody watching, sat down in his lap, wrapped her arms around his so he couldn't move. She was as strong as a bear. And then she started kissing him, saying, "Oh, honey, why don't you come see me anymore? You know I love you." And I said, "Go on, have a good time. It's customary here. I won't ride home and tell your folks about it." But the old man, he just sputtered and spit and wiped his mouth with his handkerchief and got up and left the hotel. And that was the last we saw of him that night. So then, well, we commenced getting further acquainted with the women who worked in the sporting houses in Miles City. I remember there was Connie, the cowboy queen. She had a dress that we reckoned was worth about $250 because it had a brand of every outfit all the way from the Yellowstone down to the Platte River. There wasn't an outfit that couldn't find her brand on that dress. And there was Cowboy Annie. You know, we all had our favorites once we got acquainted. And we'd go into town, Miles City. We'd marry a girl for a week. We'd take her to breakfast and supper and dinner and be with her all the time. You couldn't do that in other towns. Some towns passed laws that didn't allow these ladies to walk the streets in daylight hours. But Miles City was different. Like I say, we sometimes married a girl for a week. And I suppose these things might shock a lot of respectable people, but we wasn't respectable, and we didn't pretend to be, which was one of the only ways we was different from some other folk. I wrote a song for Cowboy Annie. Never did get a chance to sing it to her. In Miles City there is a girl with long black hair and big black eyes, and with her peachy cheeks and her ruby lips that I love to kiss. Oh, Cowboy Annie was her name, and the in-bar outfit was her game. Work all year on the muscle shell, then blow it all in spite of hell. And when the beef is 5 years old, we'll fill her pillow slips with gold. Cowboy Annie. Well, enough of Miles City and the sporting houses. I could go on, but I want to tell you more about the life that the cowboy led with the bringing up trail drives. It was a dreadful job. I only spent 5 years at it. I got out after 5 years because I wanted to spare my life. And a lot of others weren't so lucky. I don't know if I've mentioned the storms that we had. I remember one storm killed 14 head of cattle, 6 or 7 horses, and 2 men. One storm. I remember one man was so afraid of the lightning that he threw away his 6-shooters out of fear it would draw the lightning. And I remember old Matt Winter, one time with the rain pouring down and the lightning flashing, looking up at God Almighty and saying, taking his hat off and saying, "All right, you bald-headed son of a gun, if you want to kill me, then come on and do it." It scared the daylights out of us, those lightning storms. A lot of cowboys was killed by lightning, and that is history. I was knocked off my horse by it twice. The first time is that thunder? First time I saw a ball of fire coming toward me and I felt something hit me in the head. When I came to, I was underneath my horse with the rain pouring down. The second time I was trying to get under a railroad bridge when it hit me, and I come to in a ditch. And the cattle was always restless at night, even if the storm was a long ways off. And that's when any little thing could start a stampede. Lots of times I've ridden around the cattle at night with the lightning flashing and the thunder muttering in the distance, when the air was so full of electricity that you could see it flashing on the horns of the cattle. And you could see little balls of it on the ends of your mustache or the ends of a horse's ear, little balls the size of a pea. I suppose it was static electricity, the same kind you get when you shake a blanket on a winter night in a dark room. But when you add it all up, I think the worst hardship we had coming up the trail, let me ask you, does anyone want to take a guess what the worst part of the trail drives were?
Death.
Oh, death was the worst, okay. That's true.
Dust.
Next to death.
Dust.
Dust. Yeah, dust. Coming up, pushing in the rear. You'd sometimes build up an inch of dust and you'd be coughing that stuff up for days. No, even worse than dust.
Flies.
Oh, even worse than flies.
Rivers. Water.
The rivers, they were a son of a gun, yeah. No, it was loss of sleep. Loss of sleep. There were a number of times when, because the weather was so bad, we'd spend 60 hours without any sleep, trying to keep the herd together. And if you got caught napping, you'd lose your job. Our day didn't end till 9 o'clock at night when we grazed the herd onto bed ground. And after that, it was the job of every man in the outfit, except the trail boss, the horse wrangler, and the cook, to stand 2 hours night guard. Say my shift was from 12 to 2. I'd stake my night horse, roll out my bed, pull off my boots, crawl in at 9, get 3 hours of sleep, ride night guard for 2 hours, come in off guard, get another hour and a half of sleep, until the cook yelled, "Roll out" at 3:30. Sometimes they were nice about how they woke us up. They sang us a song. I remember this being sung to us quite a few times. Wake up, Jacob, day's a-breaking, frying pan on and hoe cake baking, bacon in the pan, coffee in the pot, come on now and get it while it's hot. So you'd be lucky to get 5 hours of sleep if the weather was nice and everything running smooth and pretty with cowboys singing underneath the stars. But if the weather wasn't nice, you'd be lucky to get an hour of sleep. And the wagon rolled on in the morning just the same. Sometimes we'd rub tobacco juice in our eyes to stay awake. It was rubbing them with fire. I've done that a few times, and I've often sat sound asleep in my saddle for just a few minutes. I remember coming up the trail one year, we came to the Blue River, and waves from the north wind was blowing waves 2 feet high in the cattle's faces. So they wouldn't take to the water on account of these waves. They bowled on us, which means they won't do nothing but just stand there and look at you. So since they wouldn't take to the water, we had to hold him there that night, and it came up an awful storm, and we was up all night long, and we spent the whole next day getting him across the river. And that next night on night guard, my partner Joe Buckner says to me, "Teddy, I am going to Greenland where the nights are 6 months long. And I ain't gonna get up until 10 o'clock the next morning." But if you said anything to the trail boss, he'd just say, "Ah, what you kicking about? You can sleep all winter when you get to Montana." Yeah. Well, I want to tell you some more about songs and the cowboy. You know, a lot of these songs we came up with, we didn't come up with around the fire. We didn't spend too much time around the fire singing at night. We got as much sleep as we could when we could get it. And if we had any spare time, we'd spend it writing home or maybe playing cards if the trail boss allowed it. I think one reason that there's so many songs about cowboys, it comes from the custom we had of singing to the cattle on night herd. Now, it was supposed to soothe them. And it did. I don't know why. Unless it was a sound that they was used to would keep them from spooking at other noises. I know that if you wasn't singing to them, then any little noise in the night, it might be just a horse shaking himself, could start a stampede and make them leave the country. But if you were singing to them, they wouldn't notice it. The two men on night guard would circle around with their horses at a walk in opposite directions, and one man would sing the verse of a song, and then the man, his partner on the other side of the herd, would sing the next verse, and you'd go through a whole song like that. I had a crackerjack of a partner in '79. He'd sing and I'd answer, and we'd keep it up like that for 2 hours. But he was killed by lightning in '85 on Sunday Creek. He was the one who was going to Greenland where the nights are 6 months long. Well, after a while on night herd, sometimes you'd run out of words to sing, and you'd just sing anything that came into your head. Or maybe nothing at all. I don't know if any of you have heard of a Texas lullaby, but those were songs we sang to the cattle and that didn't have any words. Texas lullabies. They worked. But often we'd end up coming up with words writing about the fellas in our outfit, or the women in Miles City, or the rivers we crossed and the country we crossed. This song, called the Ogallala song, and in this song there's a verse for every river coming up, going north. Whatever trail you were on, the trails, the Texas Trail, bringing cattle up out of Texas to the railheads, is what the whole idea was. There were no railroads going down to Texas in the 60s and 70s, and there was a whole bunch of cattle, the longhorns, that needed to get to market, and the trail moved east and west depending on the grass and the water over time, but they all went to railheads, and they all crossed the same rivers. And this song grew as the trails grew north, and like I say, there's a song for almost every river we crossed. We left Nueces River in April '81 with 3,000 long-haired cattle, and all they knowed was run. Well, we got them through the brush all right, clear up to San Antone. Got some grub and headed north as slick as any bone. Then we crossed the Colorado at Austin, a big town, then headed north until we struck the store of great renown. And the old Red River was on the prod and swum from bank to bank, but we busted her and got across, a good horse for to thank. And the Washita was running full, but we got 'em all across and counted on the other side and never had a loss. Then we got to old Dodge City on the Arkansas, got some drinks and some more grub, then pulled out once more. Then on the Republican we got another storm. Boss said, "This is the damnedest country I've seen since I was born." And then down Pumpkin Creek to the old Tongue River, down the flat to my old city on the Yellowstone. Well, we busted her through mush and ice, she's as cold as hell. Then we turned them loose out on the Muscle Shell, and that was the end of the Texas Trail. That was the end of the Texas Trail. That was the end of the Texas Trail. About the furthest trail herds went was Montana. Yeah. So a lot of the songs we wrote were a night guard, like I say. I remember I wrote a song. I wrote quite a few songs, and this song I like. It was about a guy from Chicago who had a lot of money, a young man, and he wanted to learn the cow business. It's called Chicago Charlie. There was Chicago Charlie, God help the poor crank. He's got $10,000 locked up in a bank, but he wants to be a cowboy, so what must he do? What, punch up the drags for the big 22? Well, let's see how we're doing here on time. I think I have a few more songs. Yeah. I'm going to stop talking, and I'll be happy to answer any questions afterwards. This, by the way, I haven't mentioned, I would like to thank First Night, and I'd like to thank you, all of you, for coming. Happy New Year. But I'd especially like to thank the Montana Committee for the Humanities, who has sponsored this presentation, and the one before it, a couple of them before it, David Walter and some others. The Montana Committee for the Humanities celebrated their 25th anniversary this year. Their office is right here on this campus. And I'd like to sing a song that my friend and partner Greg Keeler wrote in Bozeman for the Montana Committee for the Humanities. And it's called I'm the MCH, which is the outfit now that I'm working for.
Play hard now.
I'm the MCH, boys. I travel across the state, boys, all the way from Flathead Lake, boys, out to the Missouri Breaks, boys, all for culture's sake, boys. Oh, I'm the MCH. I've been to Whitehall, Great Falls, Judith Gap, Belknap, Rygate, Phosphate, Intake, Fish Trap, Weebo, Mudlow, Shoto, Tarkio, Igamar, Silver Star. Where the hell is Roscoe? 2.3 Park, 16 Plentywood, Oh, I'm the MCH, boys. I travel across the state, boys, all the way from Flathead Lake, boys, out to the Missouri Breaks, boys, all for culture's sake, boys. Oh, I'm the MCH. I've been to Wild Horse, Hungry Horse, Lame Deer, Deer Lodge, Antelope, Buffalo, Anaconda, Echolaka. Yep, it's an animal, a cross between an eagle and an alpaca. Trout Creek, Whitefish, Beaverhead, Swan Lake, Wolf Point, Bear Creek, Pony, Otter, Yak. Oh, I'm the MCH, boys. Travel across the state, boys, all the way from Flathead Lake, boys, out to the Missouri Breaks, boys, all for culture's sake, boys. Oh, I'm the MCH. I teach modernism, classicism, starry-eyed romanticism, mysticism, feminism, sometimes even chauvinism, formalism, pragmatism, quasi-deconstructionism, hedonism, Darwinism, socialism, realism, populism, naturalism, secular humanism, Oh, I'm the MCH, boys. I travel across the state, boys, all the way from Flathead Lake, boys, out to the Missouri Breaks, boys, all for culture's sake, boys. Oh, I'm the MCH. You know, do you want to sing one sing-along that you all know?
Yeah.
You know, this one, I don't remember when I first heard this song, or I don't know where it came from. But, it was a popular song. I don't know if it still is. I ride an old paint, and I lead an old dame, and I'm going to Montana to throw hula hand. They feed in the coulees, they water in the trough. Their tails are all matted and their backs are all raw. Ride around, little doggies, ride around real slow, for the fiery and the snuffy are raring to go. Old Bill Jones had 2 daughters and a son. One went to college, but the other went wrong. And Bill's wife, she died in a pool room fight. But Bill, he still sings from morning to night. Ride around, little doggies, ride around real slow, for the fiery and the misty are raring to go. Well, I've worked in the city and I've worked on the farm, but all I got to show is the patches on my armhouse, patches on my pants, callus on my hand. I'm going to Montana to throw hula hand. Ride around, little doggies, ride around real slow, where the fiery and the snuffy are raring to go. Oh, when I die, don't bury me tall. Just take down my pony, just take down my saddle, lead my pony from its stall, tie my bones to his back, and turn our faces to the west, and we'll ride that prairie that we both love best. Ride around, little doggies, ride around real slow, for the fiery and the snuffy are raring to go. Ride around, little doggies, ride around real slow, for the fiery and the snuffy are raring to go. Thank you. I ride an old paint and I lead an old band, and I'm going to Montana to throw Houlihan. They feed in the coulees, they water in the trough. Their tails are all matted and their backs are all raw. Ride around, little doggies, ride around real slow, for the fiery and the snuffy are raring to go. Old Bill Jones had 2 daughters and a son. One went